Welcome everyone to Thursday Night Bulwark. We are so delighted that you're with us for this now regular feature. With me tonight, I'm Mona Charon. With me is Jonathan V. Last, JVL, Bill Crystal, Tim Miller, and Sarah Longwell. And tonight we're doing something very special. We've asked for questions and been deluged. So we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. But before we get to that part of the program, which will be the bulk of it, I want to start with an image that sort of sums up, I think, where we are right now, 3 weeks after a criminal assault on our capital and our way of government, on our system of government. Here you have the former majority leader of the House, Kevin McCarthy, traveling down to Mar-a-Lago to see the criminal who incited the riot and who remains the leader, or what was it that Marco Rubio, no, that Lindsey Graham said, the most important voice in the Republican Party for a long time to come. So let us begin with Bill Crystal.
The rightful president in exile, I believe.
Hey, you brought Toulouse. Hi, Toulouse.
Hi. Wait a minute.
Hi.
No.
So Bill, we're going to get to all the comments, but somebody made a comment, posed a question that I thought was so apt. He said, the reason JVL is always right is that he takes the darkest possible interpretation of Republican behavior and predicts it, and that's why he's always right. Please comment.
Yeah, there's, I think, a famous comment, something like, I'm a pessimist because most of the time I'm going to be right, and when I'm not, I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're an optimist, it's the opposite, right? So
yes,
everything is on the upside if you're a pessimist. And JVL pretends to be a pessimist. You know, deep down though, that spark of hope, that drop of inspiration, that little lightning bolt of expectation lurks somewhere in his heart or soul, I think. I've known JVL for, yeah, I know. Well, I've seen it 3 or 4 times in the 25 years we've known each other. So, you know, I think it's there. That photo is something of Trump and McCarthy. And of course, one should add, Kevin McCarthy supported Trump's effort to overturn the election. So it is, I mean, it's not just that a good guy who's a leader of a decent party went to visit the president recently impeached for the second time president, who's now out of office, thank God, but is still doing a lot of damage, still could do a lot of damage. The guy who's leading the party in the House made the same false arguments and voted to overturn the electors as the president wished him to. Then and of course, voted against impeaching him. And on the day of impeachment, had 2 sentences that were somewhat critical of Trump, which he seems to have now walked back. And so there we are, at least for some, not all Republicans, but unfortunately, quite a lot of them, I'm afraid.
Sarah, 2.5 weeks ago, you had a false, one could have had a false sense of hope, right? There was a brief moment there where a number of people, several senators, members of Congress, 10 Republicans voted for impeachment. You had Frank Langone, the head of Home Depot, who's been a big contributor, say he's done with Trump. Even Lindsey Graham said, I'm done, I'm out, this is it, I have my lines I won't cross. Byron York said, okay, that's it, I'm out. And now, so fast, they have all crumbled. They have all just collapsed, summed up by the photo that we just showed. Do you think there's, so one of the things that has come up in the questions tonight is, what should people of conscience who want a reasonable conservative party to exist in this country, what should they do? Should they vote Democrat forever in light of this?
I don't know about forever, certainly for a while. You know, just thinking about Bill's point, one of the observations I haven't seen people making as much, or actually haven't seen it at all, but it occurred to me today, and maybe people have been making it a ton and I just missed it, but that one of the reasons that a lot of these Republicans, I think, have decided that they're not going to indict Trump on this charge is because it would indict them, right? Like the big lie that was being told, Kevin McCarthy was telling that lie. Jim Jordan was telling that lie. Matt Gaetz was telling that lie. Like the vast majority of the Republican Party was saying the election was stolen, the election was fraudulent, the election was not free and fair. And so if you believe that Donald Trump incited it with not just the speech right beforehand, but also with his months of lying and telling people that it was stolen, well, then they've got to look in the mirror. And I don't think people really want to do that. But, you know, you make a great point that a couple weeks ago, they had an exit ramp. They had their off ramp. And frankly, they've still got it, right? The Democrats are handing them this gift. Put a stake through Donald Trump's political future. End him now. And it looks like what they're deciding to do is say, no, we'd like to have him until as long as he's alive. He will now run the party. We'll take his kids. They will. I mean, I was just watching Marco Rubio get asked by Neil Cavuto, what about Ivanka Trump? She might primary you. And he goes, I like Ivanka Trump. Sure, they do to me what you will. These guys, JVL kind of said this, but like, these guys they've like built the meteor that is coming to destroy them as the dinosaurs of the Republican Party. They've engineered their own demise because they will never be Trumpy enough for the Trumpiest people. And so rather than give themselves the off-ramp that they need, rather than repudiating Trump, saving the party, saving the country, saving themselves, they're just gonna cash in their chips and go, either they're gonna do what Portman did and Toomey's doing and say, I'm out, spare me the MAGA primary, or they're going to just, I don't know, go along, let Matt Gaetz come yell at them. I don't know.
So Tim, I think it was Churchill, and if it, you know, he may not have said it because many of the quotes that are attributed to him, he actually didn't say, as with all great men. But there's a quote attributed to him that appeasement is the policy of feeding the crocodile and hoping it eats you last. Is that what these Republicans are doing with Trump, or do they imagine what goes through their minds? Why are they not taking the off ramp that will rid themselves of this meddlesome priest?
Mona, you're reading my mind. I'm cheating on the Bulwark next week and writing a Rolling Stone article, and I literally was looking up that very Churchill quote. It is true. He gave it at, now I'm blanking on which speech it is. I'll come up with it by my next answer. I think it is you know, how that they've not learned this lesson from 2015. You know, this was the appeasement strategy is the exact strategy that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio went with during that primary. Sorry, I'm parenting during the first half of this. Come back to me. Well, I'll get that one on the flip side with the correct quote.
Okay.
I love how Tim thought that if he muted it, she would stop. You'd stop hearing her, but he could keep talking.
Why is there not a mute button for children?
That was an unfair advantage Tim had there with a super cute kid there. I mean, Sarah has super cute kids.
Really
JVL has super cute kids, you know?
Yeah, I didn't know we could just bring them on.
Yeah, Mona and I have cute older kids, you know?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I'm hoping for grandkids eventually. You already have some.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Mona, can I just stand up for the Republicans?
Yeah. Where are you going with this?
What they cannot rid themselves of the meddlesome priest because he's what 70% of their party wants. This
Not
is
70, 40, 49, according to a poll that just came out today, 48% of Republicans want Trump to be the voice of their party going forward, and 49% don't.
That's now. Once he's out there, this is like, you know, only 42%. Look at look how little loyalty Trump commands in the 2016 primaries. You know, those Republicans will never get behind him. Of course they'll get behind him because they want a strong man. This is, look, if you are a Republican who believes that Donald Trump was the legitimate winner of the 2020 election, then you are in for all of it. And what are these guys supposed to do? I mean, their choice is to just hang around and wait until their voters change their mind or until their voters throw them out.
Okay,
right? I mean,
so
that's what this is, right?
yeah. All right, but this does bring us to the other problem. Okay, so you say, look, it's the voters, it's the base. And why does the base think what it does? Because they hear it from Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin and, you know, all these people, Laura Ingraham and the rest of them, Tucker Carlson, maybe the worst. The Charlie Sykes newsletter today for all of our Bulwark Plus viewers was epic on his takedown of Tucker Carlson. But Tucker Carlson is a really, really dangerous person, I'm sorry to say, because he's very bright and articulate, and he feeds his audience exactly the worst kinds of suspicions of their sinister hearts. So what do we do about that? How do we begin to combat this environment of disinformation? That's for you, JVL.
I don't think you can, frankly.
Oh.
That was a good JVL. Like,
Okay.
and I like Sarah's face. They should be some. We should have like some. Whenever JVL says something like that, and then Sarah reacts. That's the 1-2 punch. You know?
This is what our secret podcast is going to be like once we have the video element added to it.
You don't need a video element. You just have to replay that loop, you know, forever. Right?
Just JVL being like, give up, guys. Just
No, I don't.
The
No,
whole American experiment is dead.
I don't think giving up is the answer. I think the idea is to fight a trench warfare battle until you push this party into the sea and make it so that they control 40% of the country and not 46%. Because at that level, you can basically not lock them out of national power. And that's really all you can do until the makeup of the party and what the party wants changes or it goes away.
But I would say one thing, but it could change faster than we think. It got to this a little bit faster than we thought. It is a little bit of a bubble. Our friend Andy Zwick made this comparison to me the other night. It's with the Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff and QAnon and the Oregon Republican Party with one insane statement, and like, which one was it? Washington, some other state had another, Arizona and all that, and censoring their sitting Republican governor. It has a slight feel in stock market terms of a, like it's getting a little overheated, as they say in the market, and it's not going to blow up. It's not going to go away. The fever breaking is too comforting an analogy, I suppose, but you could imagine a little of that. I think putting driving wedges, therefore, into it where possible, getting a few decent Republicans elected to remind people that can be done. Getting a lot of more Democrats elected for now, though, to also show this isn't a winning path. I don't know if we're in for a 2-year or 5-year or 10-year battle, but it needn't be quite as bleak, I think, as JVL suggests.
Well, that's good.
But I'm setting up Sarah here to be cheerful, and Tim to come back with his, true citation of Churchill.
Okay, so I'm going to come to you in a second, Tim, but let me just come to Sarah for a sec, because just to complete the optimism thought, it may be all I've got tonight on this score, but in the state of Virginia, where I live, there is a lunatic woman who is running for governor. Her name is Amanda Chase. She calls herself Trump in heels. She's everything you can imagine, right? She wanted the president to declare martial law. She's against taking down Robert E. Lee's statue. She packed a pistol on the floor of the Senate, the whole thing. Anyway, she called the rioters who invaded the Capitol patriots. And finally, that was too much. And the Senate of Virginia this week censured her. So, and that included at least 3, it might have been a couple more Republican senators who voted to do that. So somewhere there is a little green shoot of sanity and reason that just sprouted this week.
That is some Sarah Longwell level reaching you're doing there for optimism. That's it's really good. It's like you say that while the entire Republican Congress goes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who?
Yeah.
We gave her a committee assignment, so she's fine. I don't even know what you mean. Wait, Parkland was a false flag? I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about. So, I mean, we have a problem. in the party. And I think the only way to get past it is to first admit you have a problem. The Republican Party has to be like an AA meeting, and it has to say, we've got a problem and we want to get help. It does not want to get help. This is the whole point of why impeachment would matter. If they were willing to impeach Trump, if they were willing to put him in the rear view, that would be a party looking for an off-ramp. It would be looking for revitalization. It would be looking for a restoration of sanity. That, unfortunately, like, I've been an optimist the last 4 years. It's been an incredibly painful thing to try to be throughout. And I've ultimately arrived not exactly where JVL is, because I think he goes too dark. I think Bill is right that there are ways that this churn can happen, and that you could end up, you know, with a backlash because of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Laura Boebert. But I do think for the foreseeable, if the Republicans decide to just capitulate to Trump, which it looks like they're doing, there's at least a long stretch here where like Marjorie Taylor Greene has a lot more power than Adam Kinzinger. And that's the problem.
Yeah, what we don't know, and I think it'll take a little time to figure this out, is though the Republican Party is attempting to memory hole what happened on January 6th, not at all clear that the public at large is doing that. And so they could be making a serious tactical error there. Tim, what was the completion of your thought from earlier?
Well, I could. We were dealing with a potty break, and so I don't know what exactly was my thought. I don't remember. But I will tell you that the Churchill quote is not apocryphal. It's from the House on Many Mansions, the House of Many Mansions address, which was about a month before the first German warplanes were over England. So he said that each one hopes that if he feeds the crocodile enough, the crocodile will eat him last. I think that the crocodile's already eaten the party, though, so I'm not sure it's a relevant quote, particularly for right now. And I think that I admire Kinzinger for wanting to take on this fight right now. In particular, I think that it's a noble fight. I wish that Mitch McConnell would have taken on the fight that he claimed that he was going to take for about a week, and that him and his Goombas kind of pretended like they were going to take for a little while with some tough talk. I think it would have been on net positive for our democracy and negative for the Republican Party in the short term, which are probably two, things that happen in concert. But it's not going to happen because it's too late. Like the war is already over, and I think that's the thing that JVL is accurate about, and that I think that we've been seeing more clearly than even some Democrats, frankly. Like I'm always like the most negative on MSNBC, where the liberal panelists are hoping for some the Lincoln Project wing of the Republican Party to come ascendant. I'm like, they're not in the Republican Party anymore. That's why you guys like them so much. That is, I just think that the reality, we've got to deal with reality and trying to decide the best way forward.
Okay, so this is my last question, and it's for anybody in the group who would care to answer it, and then we'll go to Jim, and he'll give us the audience's questions. But mine is, in light of the structural advantage that Republicans have with the Senate and with the shape of the country being what it is, and with rural voters having disproportionate voting influence compared with urban voters, isn't it possible that we are still dealing with a situation in which a party, the Republican Party, as crazed and as anti-democratic as it is becoming, can still win national elections and can still govern, can still, destroy democracy if given the opportunity? Anybody who wants to jump in on that?
Yeah, can I? Oh, no, Sarah, you should. I don't want to cut you off because people get very upset when I do that.
Just very, very briefly, I'll just say the chances of Kevin McCarthy being Speaker of the House in 2 years are very high. Like, the Democrats have a tough map to guard against. And JVL, I'll let JVL hit the part about the way that the demographic skews in Republicans' favor. But there's just an incredibly narrow majority. And Joe Biden, I think if we're being honest, is a 4-year president. And I think that after him, he was the only guy who was going to come up there and beat Trump. And so like the idea that Republicans could take back the House in 22 or even the Senate, look, I don't know what it means that Portman and Toomey are retiring, how
Well,
that
the Democrats have the House. Sorry, you misspoke. Say that again.
No. No, I mean, well, you mean the Democrats have the Senate? I'm saying that the Republicans could take back the Senate.
Sorry, you said the Democrats. Sorry, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. I thought you said. Okay.
I mean that the Republicans could take back both, is my point.
Right, okay.
Republicans could easily win back the House, the Senate, and the presidency in 4 years. And like that is absolutely not off the table. I hear Democrats saying sometimes, well, Trump has just absolutely torched himself. Republicans have torched themselves. No.
Yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
JVL, you go.
JVL.
This is so what I mean, the basic demographic reality is that Democrats have large and growing margins in the parts of the country which are growing in population. The Republicans have large and growing majorities in places that are shrinking. But what they're doing is the Republicans are running their margins up to the kind of Saddam Hussein-like levels that nobody ever thought was really possible, right? So in rural America, instead of it being 65-35 Republican, it's now like 85-15. And why couldn't it go to 95-5, right? So this is, you can see how they can continue to hold off their demographic decline by simply increasing their margins. When you look at it, the next 10 years or so, what we have are two transitions happening where the Sun Belt is becoming more and more safe for Democrats and will eventually probably be Democratic. Eventually, we think Texas will flip. Arizona's probably flipped for good. Nevada maybe flipped for good. Georgia flipped, maybe not for good yet, but is trending in that direction. And those blue wall states from 2016, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those become harder for the Democrats. And that's a good trade because the Sun Belt is growing in population and the industrial North is not. But what it means is that for the next 10 years or so, at least, it's going to be a very close run thing. And even though Democrats will win national majorities in every single one of these elections because of the geography, they are essentially spotting Republicans about 4.5 or 5 points in every single national race. So, you can see where you get a freak occurrence, a terrorist attack, or a new variant of the virus that is resistant to the vaccine, or there's a stock market crash. I mean, all sorts of exogenous events, which, just sort of sink normal political parties.
That sentence was a classic JVL sentence. Just off the top of his head, you can imagine
meteor crash,
or terrorist attack, or stock market crash, any, whatever.
Tsunami.
All I'm saying is very easy to see Democrats losing power and Republicans taking power. And this is why I am running around with klaxons saying that the most important thing the Democratic Party has to do is keep the Republican Party out of power for the foreseeable future. It's more important than any single policy goal.
Okay. One last quick thing, Bill, and then I promise I'll give up the chair. But Bill, there are a number of Republicans you can imagine the party coalescing around that are not Trump, but that are very Trumpy, including members of his family, Ted Cruz, Hawley types, etc. There's nobody that comes to mind on the Democratic side, is there, who would have the same broad appeal all the way from the never Trump Republicans who voted for Biden all the way over to the Bernie bros?
Yeah, but it's a long way off, and someone in the Biden cabinet or some senator who distinguishes himself or herself during the Biden years, or Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg. I don't know if it's quite that grim. And I do think, again, the conspiracy theories right now, they seem to be paying not much of a price for closing their eyes to Marjorie Taylor Greene and those types, and pretending January 6th didn't happen. And maybe that will stay that way, or maybe it won't. I mean, this is where I don't think one can be sure when people look at it. Again, it was what Andy Zwick was saying about the bubble. But people look at it, and the bubble goes on a long time. People say that bubble's going to burst. Doesn't burst. The market goes up another. Some stock goes up. Well, now it's very relevant with all the craziness on Wall Street. But the stock goes up another 30%, and then at some point people look up and say, "Geez, this is crazy," And you don't quite know. Maybe some event will happen. Maybe the Democrats really need to have and I talked to a couple today, and I think maybe they're getting there, but they need to have a plan, though, to get to JPL's point, for how to make sure to drive that Republican, to drive 5, 7, 8, 9% of the Republicans away from the Republican Party by making Marjorie Taylor Greene the face of the party. I mean, the Republicans did a pretty decent job of trying to make AOL and Ilhan Omar
AOC, yeah.
Democratic Party. It scared a fair number of non-Trumpy Republicans back into Trump's arms, or was the excuse they used, at least, to go back into Trump's arms. The Democrats are busy governing and Biden's president and so forth, but they could spend a little more time doing some damage, honestly, to the Republicans, because it's not going to just happen spontaneously. You know?
Okay, Jim Swift, I now relinquish the chair. We are in your capable hands.
Oh God, you guys are screwed. The first question that I would like to pose to the panel, and this is for everyone, is from Rita Parker from Round Rock, Texas. And Rita asks, if the Republican Party cannot be saved, what is the answer?
Hi, Rita. I'll take it. Good to not, I guess you're not in my inbox. We'll just kind of talk here, even though I don't get to see you. The answer is to drive the Republican Party down and force them to switch. And I mean, make sure that forces, outside forces, survival forces, require them to change. I mean, it's just as simple as that. I mean, if you look at what's happening in Hungary, where you have this broad coalition against Orban from literal communists, all the way through free market, classical liberals. I think that's the kind of coalition that the Democrats need to try to build to deal with what JVL was talking about the challenge in the short term. I think that it's possible that there'll be kind of a disruptive third party force at some time. I know we have a lot of questions about that, so we could talk about that at greater length later. But in the short run, I think that trying to turn them into a rump Marjorie Taylor Greene party until it forces them to act better for survival purposes is the best answer.
Okay, our next question is from Mark Civic. He is a Bulwark Plus member who is an original, I would say an OG member from Northeastern Ohio. And his question is, it presupposes the strategic thinking that right business leaders that want employees who tell the truth and be trusted. If so, what could be done to persuade people in the business community to support the Romney wing of the GOP because it's in their economic interest and because it's good for the country? I mean, I get his question. His question is, geez, I mean, like, the party's gone crazy. There's still a couple sane people who, occupy seats in the House and the Senate, but how do you get the Chamber of Commerce to continue to support aspects of the Republican Party?
I don't have a good answer to this, but can I just say, for the sake of being disruptive, that I have been amazed at how lacking in solid common sense a number of these business leaders have proved to be, and how much many of them have absorbed some of these conspiracies and loony talk. I mean, people who run big companies and you would think could not possibly believe this stuff, because how are you a successful businessman doing this? Donald Trump was, at least a somewhat successful businessman, and he believes all this stuff, or at least partially. He convinces himself of whatever it's convenient for him to do.
I meant somewhat unsuccessful businessman.
Oh, yeah. Right. I know. All those bankruptcies and all the rest of it. But anyway, it is, so one of the things that has struck me over the last few years is that people who you thought would be solid have proved to be less so. But that's not much of an answer.
So you sell millions of pillows and you're still Looney Tunes. Or like the Overstack guy or whatever. Like,
yes.
Part of it is wild. That being said, I mean, there's been a lot of encouraging things going on with a bunch of businesses hitting pause after the Capitol insurrection. Some of that might be just figuring out, like, are these guys really damaged goods, and or like how much would it hurt me if I continued to donate to them? But I mean, the best thing to do is for Democrats to make a play for those donors, right? For Democrats to be, to kind of shake off some of that they're bad for business. I mean, look,
Yeah.
what is it, Tim, that sometimes people call us the capitalist wing of Antifa? It's like, okay, well, maybe that's, I don't know about Antifa, but the capitalist wing's probably true. And I think that the capitalist wing of the Democratic Party should shut these guys down. Like, they have the opportunity just to peel off, just like these college educated suburban voters, they can peel off a lot of the business community, small businesses. And I think that, because that's a big part of what's holding Trump's coalition together. It's like crazy people. And then like the business community who are just like, I don't know, I can't deal with the left's regulatory and just the general way that they view business and taxation. And that doesn't mean that you give massive tax cuts to CEOs and corporations, but like just acting more open for business could be a game changer in this moment.
Yeah, in every single speech that he ever gave or will give until he dies, Bernie Sanders will portray everybody who makes a profit as a wicked thief, right? Who is taking from the JVL. What's wrong with that?
People don't realize JVL is just the Antifa wing of Antifa.
Yeah.
Sarah, we have a question from a Meade Solomon from St. Louis, Missouri, and he asked, "Can I hike the Appalachian Trail with you?"
This is why does everybody want to hike the Appalachian Trail? I know that JVL brought this up as like a great idea, but I mean, all I know about the Appalachian Trail is people die on it, and also that it's extremely long. Like, I have 2 children. Like, who's going to let me hike an entire Appalachian Trail? But I really appreciate that's a thing that you would like to do with me. JVL also, like, JVL's looking for a buddy to do the Appalachian Trail. Hit him up.
Okay.
It'll be dark.
So the next question comes from Pamela Westonsko from Wilsonville, Oregon, and she poses this question to everyone but Jonathan, and he will know why, but I would love to hear his thoughts. And her question is, as Never Trumpers, now detached from Republicanism or Conservatism Inc., have you been rethinking your conservative beliefs and become more open to liberal policies / ideology? I am, and I believe many of the Never Trumpers are in this boat. If true, where does this lead? I remember in the early days of Trump, Bill Kristol said he felt his inner liberal coming out. That's exactly how I felt.
I mean, I would say,
Go
I
ahead,
haven't
Bill.
really moved from a conservative ideology to a liberal ideology, but I have rethought some things. We've discussed this a little before, and I guess I do feel like for some, you go to Washington, you work in my case, you work in a couple of administrations, you work a couple of campaigns, edit a conservative magazine, you sort of fall into a rut, frankly, and you have all your allies, and it's kind of inconvenient to question them too much. You kind of know vaguely this is a little oversimplified or maybe a little off. And you kind of chug along on that. So I think it's more, I feel a little bit liberated from ideology. And obviously, no one's fully liberated from various worldviews and so forth. And you shouldn't be, but trying to rethink. And also, I do think it's a new times. You combine it's 2021. New technology, social media, pandemic, new world, China. I mean, a lot of different issues than the ones that certainly Mona and I dealt with when we first came to Washington in the '80s, and combine that with the collapse of conservatism into Trumpism, collapse of the Republican Party into Trumpism in large measure. And I do think it's a time for rethinking, but not just trading in one ideology for another. Some of that rethinking leads you obviously in a more liberal direction, but liberal is still a word. It's interesting. Liberalism has its problems. Liberal is still a positive word, right? Liberal democracy, liberal education, liberality of spirit. People use the term all the time as a kind of, it makes you think a little bit more about the virtues of being more liberal, especially today when you have illiberal conservatives.
I've given this some thought too, and as Bill knows, we also discussed it. But I actually feel very sincerely that this has had, even though it's been an absolutely demoralizing period to live through and horrifying in some respects, I do think or hope that it has made me a much more open-minded person. Admittedly, it took a lot to pry my mind open and think anew, especially in my 60s. I didn't expect to change so many views, but I have. And it was unwilling, but I think and believe that I'm a more open and more a better person. One of the things that I hope will come out of this horrible period is that the kind of reflexive, snarky nastiness that I used to have vis-a-vis Democrats and liberals, if I look back at some of the writing that I did 10 or 15 years ago, it makes me cringe now, because I feel that there's been so much of that, and you can see now where it leads. And further, it was just mean-spirited and ungenerous. And the fact is, it's not helpful. And so I do hope that, I mean, I bring a different spirit to things now. I mean, I hope I'm not pulling any punches, but I do try to give the benefit of the doubt more to people that I used to dismiss.
Sarah hasn't decided yet if she's running for office as a Republican or a Democrat, so I'm going to keep her from having to answer that, and I'll take the last one. You know, just keep her options open a little bit in those primaries that can get heated. But I was always a squish. You know, I was always a squishy. I always liked the squishiest of the Republicans, so I didn't really change all that much. It was not just Trump, obviously, as you've probably seen earlier tonight, but like my view on racial issues have changed a lot over the last 4 years. I think I was very close-minded and not and kind of didn't even really understand the arguments for things like affirmative action, and you know, I was always pretty liberal on policing issues, but other issues related to race. I've gotten very squishy on guns lately, and it was and frankly, it was like the Republicans' just heartless response. This wasn't Trump, like overall to school shootings from Parkland all the way down has just like boggled my mind that we couldn't get any, like that they couldn't agree on a single reform after things like that. You know, it's kind of radicalized me on guns, so getting a little more liberal on that. And I'm pretty sick of rich people. So I don't know. I used to feel very strongly about the top marginal tax rate, but I don't really care about the top marginal tax rate anymore. I mean, on balance, I guess I'd rather it be lower, but whatever. If y'all want to squeeze them a little bit, that's fine with me.
I'm just gonna throw one thing in, which is that I don't know that I've changed very much on a bunch of like individual policy issues. I will say the frame through which I look at politics now has changed dramatically. Because I think working in party politics, you know, I had a little bit of you have your jersey on, and you start to identify with a side. And I have shed that entirely, because my frame now I think is about liberal democracy. And I think that, you know, we because we're in a moment where it used to be that like what defined the parties, at least from my perspective, was, you know, how do you want to make people's lives better? What are the policies that you think do that? And then you argue over them, but everybody's still friends. Now you have an actual political party that and I think there's elements of illiberality in the Democrats, but on the Republican side, there is an outright war on truth. Like there's an outright war on facts, and nothing has been more evidence of that than what happened the last 2 months after the election. And so like right now, you're either on the side of democracy or you're an enemy of democracy. And Republicans, a lot of them right now are enemies of democracy. So, you know, I think it's changed the whole way I think I look at politics.
You know, before we move on real quick, I just want to say one thing about this, which I hesitate to speak in such like truly Nietzschean terms here, but it was jarring for me to look up over the last 4 years. And the one issue which I have really rethought isn't quite the word, but reprioritized one is life issues, life stuff. And, you know, my whole life I've been an anti-abortion nut job. And to look up and see that suddenly these people who you thought were, you know, like interested in the seamless garment of life and were good human beings, not all of them, but an enormous percentage of them were championing things which were truly evil. we're going to lead to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, which we're going to have kids put into cages and families ripped apart, and to see the people who were, theoretically on my side on abortion stuff be into that, snapped my head back in ways which I have still not fully, there does become this real dissonance where, you think you have these values and you look up and you see that some large chunk of the other people sharing these values with you are just categorically evil. And it does make you think, well, wait a minute, hold on. Was I right about this stuff or was I just wrong about it?
So the next question comes from Missy Troth, who I will admit my bias here is from Cleveland, Ohio. And she asks, with Rob Portman announcing his intention not to run for re-election in the Senate, and Jim Jordan announcing that he is not running, which Missy says, thank God. What do you think happens to that seat? Do the Democrats have any chance to flip it?
Tim, you fellow.
Tim?
Yeah, I'm worried. I'm worried about who the Democrats nominate there. I mean, Sherrod Brown really is a uniquely strong candidate, and I think that right now in politics, our races are so nationalized that gets kind of minimized a little bit. But I think 10 years ago, candidate strength was considered a lot more, and now it's kind of we've had wave election. But Sherrod Brown won. In a year that Democrats lost the rest of the seats in Ohio, and so he's been a real outlier. And I think that I expected Ohio. I didn't expect Biden to win Ohio, but I expected it to be closer than it was this last time. So, the Democrats need to put up a candidate that can not only excite the base in the Cincinnati burbs and in the city in Cleveland, but also do well enough in Akron and Dayton and smaller towns along the Pennsylvania border. Who is that? I worry about who the Democrats would be able to put up there. And I think that even if the Republicans put up an insane Trumper that can run up the Saddam Hussein like numbers in the rest of Ohio, like the math might not be there. So, we'll see who Democrats put up in all these states. I wouldn't throw it off the map at all, but Ohio's moving the other direction from what you saw in Georgia. So I think it's potentially winnable with a MAGA candidate and a strong Democrat that can do what Sherrod did, but I don't know who that person is. And the names I've seen on the Democrats aren't really lighting my pants on fire.
LeBron?
I mean, LeBron wants to play a season with Bronny, so it's a little too soon for him to be in the Senate. Bronny's still in high school, and he wants to do one season with Bronny. Is my understanding from my sources in LeBron world.
He can play while he's in the Senate. They don't do anything.
That's a good
Why do you think Jim Jordan's not running?
Because he's going to be the Speaker of the damn House.
Yeah.
Kevin McCarthy's getting eaten by the crocodiles that we talked about earlier. He thinks that he's navigating his way through, and
we need some Stacey Abrams action in Ohio. Get out the back.
I believe also Jim Jordan said explicitly he wasn't running this afternoon.
Yeah.
I think Jordan will either try to take out, Liz Cheney. We'll see what happens with that, or go right for McCarthy in the beginning of the next Congress.
So the next question comes from Doug Moser from Boston, Massachusetts, and his question is: please discuss your position on eliminating the filibuster, given the current political environment, and weigh the pros and cons of how you got there.
Is this a troll question, Jim? Did you do this to troll us?
No.
None of us know what our position on the filibuster is. Jim can assign us all a position.
I'll give a 30-second answer because it's obviously a big company. I've always been against the for changing, if not eliminating, the filibuster as it's developed, because it's changed so much in the 30 years I've been in DC, and it has not contributed to the greater use of it, the automatic use of it now, turning it not from a filibuster to a 60-vote requirement to bring anything to the floor. has not increased compromise. It has not made legislation better. It's destroyed the normal authorizing and appropriating process, which had its problems, but actually led to debates and amendments and, the legislation, people trying to compromise in committee and so forth. So the funny thing is, it's become just a conservative talking point now because the Democrats are going to abolish the filibuster. Serious conservative scholars of Congress, Constitution, thought a lot about this at AEI and in the Academy. Have always written important, good pieces. Our friend Gary Schmidt against the filibuster. So it's kind of funny how it's become a knee-jerk Republican thing. When I wouldn't maybe want to do away with it on all major pieces of legislation. There are times you want to maybe insist on a supermajority, but the idea that we should, the current Congress is broken. There are many reasons for that, but the filibuster is one in the Senate.
I have a comment on that as well, because one of the things you hear from Republicans when they're warning darkly about the demise of the filibuster is they say, well, then, the Senate would be just like the House and it would be the tyranny of the majority. Now, there are a couple things about this. First of all, the Senate would not be just like the House. It only has 100 members, not 435, and they're staggered in the way that they are elected. So there are other aspects of the Senate that would differ. But the other thing, this notion of the tyranny of the majority. Look, the reason that we protect the rights of minorities in this country is because that is the tyranny of the majority would only be an issue if people's rights were being violated, right? The rights that are guaranteed in the Constitution. It's not the tyranny of the majority for passing legislation. That's how you pass legislation. You get more votes than the other side does. That's not tyranny. That's democracy. So the notion that without the filibuster, we're going to destroy some freedoms. No, we're not talking about the right to free speech. We're not talking about the right to worship. We're not talking about any of those things. We're talking about whether you can pass a bill with 60 votes or with 50. That's all.
Well, Mona, I'm as a former Senate staffer, I'm with you. Behind me, I have John Warner from a 1984 Senate campaign poster. So I'm very much a proponent of the filibuster.
We got in the comments, and I got an email about this, so I just want to mention it because I agree with the emailer. I should have mentioned it when I was tweeting about this. I do like the talking filibuster if we're going to have it.
Yes.
I feel like that is maybe a good solution. Make these guys earn it rather than just have a natural one.
Yeah, it was only in, I think, 1974, 75 that they changed the rule that had required you to actually speak, and you had to have, I think, a third of the members in their seats in order to maintain a filibuster. That made it so that it really was a stopgap for things that people felt particularly passionately about.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't require any effort at all.
No,
Can I just be the lone voice to speak up for the filibuster here? And I'm slightly persuadable on this particular thing, but I will just say the practical reality is, as JVL just pointed out, Republicans have a massive geographic advantage in the Senate. And if you're cool with getting rid of the filibuster, just know that the likelihood of Republicans taking control of the Senate shortly and even potentially holding it for long periods of time, that's the reality. And that if the filibuster if it was not there, they would definitely have repealed Obamacare. There's just, it is a guardrail.
Obamacare went down on
Oh, you're right. Well, they put it through reconciliation
on a 50-49 vote, so whatever.
You're right.
Yeah,
but they had to do it in
You correct me.
reconciliation.
Right,
Probably screwed them up. So it's partly true. Yeah.
Well, to Sarah's point, there's a procedure known as rotating secret holds, right? This is a way that 2 or 3 senators can stop a nomination. They can stop legislation and hey, unanimous consent. Are we going to go to this? Senator X goes down to the floor and says, no, I object. And then a day later, hey, can we move to this? Nope. Senator Y says, we're not going to do this.
This majority leader steamrolls that. That's not hard to overcome. You just have to wait 2 days or something.
Well, yeah, no, I'm
for slowing things down, but the case for really thoroughgoing filibuster, it's not even a filibuster now. The case for a 60-vote majority, on everything, on the motion to proceed, on appropriations bills. Why do we have this insane continuing resolution omnibus stuff at the end of the year, which is a nightmare in terms of just actual responsible policymaking? Because you can't get anything passed. And so it all gets into one must pass measure. So we're about to hit the debt ceiling, or about to bankrupt, the government's about to go run out of money. You know, if you actually had like as they did when I got to Washington, there was not tyranny in Washington in the Reagan administration. And we had education bill would come to the floor and there'd be a fight and some would win and lose some amendments. It was really a healthier system, I'd say, on the whole. And there might be ways to construct the kind of thing you're talking about, Jim, some delays and, you know, a filibuster on major pieces of legislation, but then it should be an actual debating filibuster, not just a 60 vote.
Yeah, no, and Bill, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I was there on a Friday afternoon when Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid and John Kyle teamed up to steamroll Jim DeMint and pass a bill he was, he was objecting to by unanimous consent. The next question here is from Richard Cavey from Casanova, New York. And this is for everybody. And his question is, what will the Republican Party look like 1 year from now? Fire up those crystal balls and opine.
The
They're gonna
same.
Did you say the same? Or
Same.
insane?
Just both. The same, but also insane. That's my answer.
Oh, geez. Now I have to find another question. If everyone...
I think I would predict that at least one Trump family member will be eyeing national office.
Lara is my pick in the
Yeah,
Trump.
but why do we think it would just be one, right? I mean, why not Lara and John and Don Jr. and Ivanka? Why not?
Well, if you have prima nocte, might as well have all get all.
Another person asks, Calvin from Los Angeles, what do you think the chances are that Marjorie Taylor Greene will be kicked out of Congress?
0.
Okay.
I mean, I'm slightly against expelling people from Congress once they've been elected. It really has to rise to a very high level, not probably higher than idiotic or repulsive offensive statements. But the House Republicans by themselves can, of course, decide not to give her a committee slot and not to give her campaign funding. She was not, remember, she won the primary. There was some resistance to her. They kind of hoped the other person would win the primary. She won the primary. She was designated by the National Republican Congressional Committee, the official campaign arm of the House Republicans, as a young gun, which is the kind of status they give you if you're a promising candidate and a seat you can win, and it helps signal donors in the business community that you deserve money. They spent some money in the race. They helped her win, and now they put her on the Education Committee, I believe, and they haven't even censured her within the conference, let alone the whole House. I mean, it is the Democrats might, in fact, censure her, I would guess, for comments and so forth, but it should, in a funny way, I almost wish they wouldn't. It's the Republicans' responsibility, and the Democrats have there's a house-wide responsibility to insist on decent conduct by your members, granted, but to let the Republicans just dodge this, and it is unbelievable. I mean, when did these comments came out days and weeks ago? And has anyone even said anything? Is there no Republican ranking member of the Education and Labor Committee who said, frankly, I don't think it's quite appropriate.
Oh, yes. Kevin McCarthy said he was going to have to speak to her.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
His spokesman said that.
His spokesman, yes.
Next question, and we only have about 5 minutes left here, comes from Bill Rochefort from Indianapolis, Indiana. And his question is, I frequently hear that it is exceedingly difficult to create a viable third party today. Why is that the case? What must a group do, either at the state or national level, to create a successful modern political party?
I mean, there are many reasons, electoral reasons, and first past the post electoral system and single member districts. And some of those things could be changed, which might increase the chances of a somewhat European style third, fourth, fifth parties, which has its problems as well as its blessings. But the main reason, truthfully, the ballot access, some of that stuff is not as difficult, not as impossible as people say. The main reason is Coke and Pepsi, right? You have two huge parties that have been going for over a century, and everyone is very used to being one or the other, and all kinds of everything from the county level to the Congress of the United States are organized along the lines of these parties. And so it's very hard to, you can run a good candidate somewhere and maybe squeak through with 38% of the vote against the two parties getting, my math's not going to be good, 31 and 29 or something like that. But in most races, you'll run a good race, you'll get 22% of the vote. The Republican will get 40, the Democrat will get 38. And then that was kind of a lot of effort to run third. So.
Right now, the biggest problem is that the Republican Party is so dangerous that running a third party is like who's going to do it? There just isn't room. I mean, the best chance for a third party would be for the Democratic Party to also become really noxious, and then maybe that there would be some space. But I just don't. There's just not space right now.
I mean, here in Virginia, where Mona and I live, we talked about this. There's, if the Republicans nominate that person Mona mentioned, who's a total Trumpy lunatic, and the Democrats don't nominate a moderate Terry McAuliffe type and nominate a far left member of the Virginia state legislature, which is possible, you could sort of imagine, there's a lot of moderate voters in Virginia. That would get interesting, but even there, it would feel to me like you'd have a one shot. I'd support Denver Riggleman or whoever would run as the third party candidate. Maybe he or she, if she ran, would win. But I still think it was kind of be a one-off, right? It wouldn't really lay the predicate necessarily for this as a national model. And yeah, as long as now you need something like that at the presidential level, I guess, two unacceptable candidates at once.
Well, I'm doing a little research. This book was written in 1970, but it's okay because it's about the 1840s and 50s and 60s. But it's by Eric Foner. It's called Free Soil, Free Labor, Free Men. It's about the rise of the Republican Party and the demise of the Whig Party. Looking for answers in history. I will report back.
So Mona, the last comment I will share is not a question. It's from Jason in New Hampshire. And he goes, I don't have a question. I would just like to hear Mona read this out loud herself. Quote, Republicans are like toddlers encouraged to put on big boy underpants. They understand that it's exciting to be a big boy. They want to, but they also know that if they don't put on big boy underpants, or if they do put on big boy underpants, they will have responsibilities. They will have to act like big boys. So they retreat to the comfort of their diapers. I'm not going to make you do that, but I'm.
Well, let it never be said that we don't have wonderful synergy here at the Bulwark, because the inspiration for that reference came from JVL, who is potty training his youngest, and told a very funny story about his little one. And so it reminded me of my potty training days. And then, of course, naturally, I thought of the Republicans.
I would also note for the record that Tim Miller and I had a sort of bet about who would be successful in potty training, since Toulouse is about the age of my twin daughters, and I won. So
That was
all right. Did anybody hear my dog sleep barking before? It was amazing. Yeah, he does that while he's dreaming. He barks, and I missed a whole question because of that. But anyway.
Well, with that, I think we're gonna end this, and we want to thank the 1,000 or so people who came to join us. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your support, and thanks for making what we do possible. We couldn't do it without you, and it really just there was a lack of words for.
It's a Bulwark joint Thursday nights. Be here
Thursday nights. Yeah, be there or be square, and
cheer up.
We'll see you next week.